Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fourth PDS talk for commercial law. Today's session will be on applying to vacation schemes. It's obviously a very relevant topic because it's application season. I'm sure many of you have been working on your applications and preparing for assessment centers. So we do hope you're going to make the most out of this opportunity. We've got a very special guest today, Alison Peyton, who has worked as graduate recruitment for a number of years at a global law firm, and now she works at Vantage. So I encourage everyone to ask questions and participate. Quick PSA though, we will be recording this session. So if you'd prefer turning off your camera and muting yourself, then please feel free to do so. However, we still encourage you to participate in the chat box to make the most out of this opportunity because it is an interactive workshop. And so without further ado, I will let Alison introduce herself and lead the session. So there you go.
Great, thank you very much, Aningo. So firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to take part in these events that you're hosting with InState. So as Annie mentioned, I'm Alison Peyton. I'm currently the Vantage Marketing Manager, and Vantage is part of Rare Recruitment. Before then, as Annie mentioned, I worked at Hogan Lovells for a number of years as one of their graduate recruitment managers. So during that time, I screened many applications for vacation schemes and training contracts, and also, interviewed students on assessment days during that time as well. Since leaving Hogan Lovells, I've worked for a number of different diversity recruitment organisations, all focusing on law. So what I'm going to talk to you today is sort of based on my Hogan Lovells experience and then my more recent experience of advising students on applications to a number of different firms. So I'm just going to be talking you through. Firstly, I'm going to cover a little bit about what is Vantage. That's my job. So I won't be doing my job if I didn't very quickly mention what it is, but I'll move on very quickly to then essentially going through sort of 3 stages. So there was the stages of what I would recommend you will do before you even start completing application forms or putting together CV and cover letter. And that's covered in the sort of the why, what, where questions, and also what are law firms looking for. We'll then look briefly at CVs and cover letters, and then application forms in a little bit more detail, because that's still, most law firms use some kind of application form process. If there's time, and I don't think there will be, I will cover assessment centres and interviews, but I put that there just for in case for some reason there are no questions, and I have time at the end, but I don't normally get to those slides, and that's another session that can take place at a later date. If you have questions, pop them in the chat box. I'll have a look throughout, but also I can take some questions at the end as well. So let's go on firstly very quickly to what is Vantage. So for those of you that don't know, Vantage is an online portal that connects you with all of the law firms and the chambers that you see here. So 5 Stone Buildings is the chambers that we currently partner with through Vantage, and then all of these top commercial law firms as well. So with Vantage, all you have to do is submit an online profile. So you fill in an online profile, takes less than 10 minutes. It's just asking for your personal details, your academic achievements to date, and then also some contextual recruitment questions about you. Once you click submit, all of that information is available for all of our partner law firms and chambers to see, and they contact you directly. And that's one of the unique aspects of Vantage, that all you need to do is submit the profile, and then it's the firms that come to you to let you know about any relevant opportunities they have. The second, probably more important unique aspect is that it uses the Rare contextual recruitment system. So when a firm is looking at your profile and looking at your academic achievements, they're able to see them in the context in which they were achieved, which is normally only something that you see at application form stage, but seeing it early in the process again means that if a firm contacts you through Vantage and maybe you're not sure if you have the academic requirements that they're looking for, or you're just missed out, if they're contacting you, then you have what they're looking for. That's all I'm going to say. You can sign up on the website. Annie's one of our campus ambassadors. I'm sure she can send you all the details as well. But there are lots of our partners at the moment contacting students about their opportunities, so do sign up if you haven't. But anyway, that's enough about that. Let's move on then firstly to those 3 kind of questions that I mentioned, or more importantly, Sally, what you need to think about and have in place before you even start filling in application forms. As Annie mentioned, it is application season. I'm sure a lot of you are doing them or about to do them or researching or deciding who to apply for. But I would really recommend you don't apply to any or start any applications until you have these 3 questions really, really clear in your head, because these are ultimately the 3 questions that you have to answer to any law firm that you're applying to. And these are the 3 questions that any law firm is going to want to hear, see, read really, really convincing answers to these 3 questions. The first is, why do I want to be a lawyer? Second, what type of lawyer do I want to be? And finally, where do I want to work? So the first one, that why do I want to be a lawyer? It's you firstly thinking back to what it was that initially attracted you to the career of a lawyer. It might have been someone you know who's a lawyer, or an event like this, or something through in-state that you've been to. It might have been some experience that you had at school, someone who came in to speak to your school. It might be none of those things and something totally different. But think what initially attracted you and what it was that made you want to pursue this further. And it's really important that you think carefully about what attracted you, because this answer has got to be unique and genuine to you. So really do think back and reflect on what initially attracted you and what made you want to explore it further. In terms of thinking back to what attracted you, it's then also, what are you doing now to make sure that it's the right career for you? And that's where all of this, attending sessions like today, doing virtual internships, doing vacation schemes, going to open days, going to webinars with firms, all of that research that you've done or should have done is all to form, this question of, why do I want to be a lawyer? I want to be a lawyer because, and I know it's definitely the right career path for me because I've done all of this research into what a lawyer does and why I will be good at it. So it's not just about knowing what a lawyer does, it's then relating that to you and why you'll be good at it. Then leading on from that, obviously, as you start going to, when you're going to all these webinars, and you've done all of that research on the firms, that should have been forming a really strong answer to what type of lawyer do I want to be. Obviously, my specialism is in commercial kind of corporate law firms. I've only worked in corporate law firms and assisted students with applications to commercial and corporate law firms. But so if you are interested in commercial law, again, why? What was that step from firstly, when you were however old wanting to be a lawyer, what was the step that you made to knowing that commercial or corporate law was the right one for you? Was it that you researched other career paths and decided on this one? Was it you considered maybe the bar and law, or was it always about commercial law firms? And if it was always about commercial law firms, why? What in particular attracted you to them? And again, it's showing all of that research that you've done. The final one is, where do I want to work? And this is not only geographically, but also the type of firm. If I just mentioned, if you want to be a commercial lawyer, you've got to convince the firms why, but then also geographically as well. If you're looking at London and the city law firms, why? What is it about city law firms that is attracting you? If you're looking at other regions of the country, national law firms, again, why? If you're looking to completely relocate to a different city, why? Why are you being attracted to there? So say, I don't know, if you're studying in London and you want to go and work in Bristol that has a number of really big firms, why? What's attracting you about regional firms? So for each question, you need to ask yourself why, and keep asking yourself why until you can ask why no more. But it's so important to have really, really clear answers to these 3 questions in your head, because you will be answering them again and again on the application form, and most definitely on assessment days as well. So having them clear in your mind in advance is really going to help your application form and make it a kind of a strong and convincing application form. And I'll come on to a little bit later on about, particularly on the why do I want to be a lawyer question, how to make it very specific to you. But know these really, really clear. And if you've already started applications and you don't know these questions, pause, stop, and really, really focus on these. If there weren't so many of you, I might put some of you on the spot and ask you now if you could answer the why do I want to be a lawyer question. Certainly if we were doing this in person somewhere, I would be turning to someone and saying, okay, why do you want to be a lawyer? And just really have that really articulate answer ready, because that's what you've got to convince the law firms. They spend a lot of money on vacation schemes. They're looking for future trainees. So they want to know that you're already a fair way along the process of answering all of these 3 questions. The next stage, again, before you, oh, there we go. That's why I want to. In terms of kind of some of the things you might want to look at about law firms, again, I'm anticipating that a lot of you might have already done this research if you're, getting ready to do application forms. But certainly in terms of that, what type of firm or where do I want to work? In terms of convincing the firm that, you want to work in them, they're looking for a high level of research and knowledge about them. And not just things that I've put there, like not just some of the clients or the international offices or, the deals and awards, but, the strategy, but also the first one on the list, the training contract, which I think students often kind of miss as actually quite an important area to focus on. There are big differences between the training contracts, particularly those offered by some of the larger firms. So it's you knowing why you're applying to that firm because of its training contract. So is it because it's 4 seats of 6 months? Is it because it's 8 seats? Is it because it's no seats, which you find in some firms? So what aspect of the training contract has attracted you? And don't overlook that. That could be a really, really valid reason, and one that's maybe a lot more personal to you than, a more generic answer, oh, it's the strategy and it's very international. So, really look at and research firms in that level of detail. The culture, probably hardest to pick up at the moment in the sense that there aren't many events taking place in firms, so open days and everything is all virtual. But through virtual events, you will get the same insight into the culture because you will still be meeting the same people, albeit not in person, but virtually, but you're still going to get a sense of the kind of people who work in the firm, the kind of people that the firm attracts. And that is going to give you a really, really good insight into the culture of the firm. So if you're not already attending lots of events, which I'm assuming you are, because you've all come today, if you're not really, really trying to attend events with firms where you're able to meet, people, albeit on a Zoom screen, but, you're going to get that really, really good sense of the culture. So once you've got all those questions kind of clear in your mind, you've done all your research, you've shortlisted your firms, you know who you want to apply to. The next stage is having it really, really clear in your head what law firms are looking for, because not only have you got to demonstrate your really, really well-researched answers to those 3 questions, but you've also got to demonstrate that you have a really, really good understanding of what law firms are looking for in future trainees listers and how you have, those skills or how you are developing those skills already. So what I want to do now, so it's not all me talking and I can have a drink of water, is can you pop into the chat box what all of you think or already know about what law firms are looking for on applications, like throughout the application process. And I shall try and find the chat box, which has disappeared. There we go. Okay, nice. Commercial awareness, my favorite, great. Lovely. You're so on it. I can tell you're all imminently doing applications. Okay. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to stop there. For some reason, my chat box keeps taking over my screen, so I'm just going to close that down. Excellent. Yes, so this is the list that I pulled together when I was putting this session, and these are, I would say, some of the most common general skills. Now, what you will find is firms will have quite specific ones on their website. So don't take this as kind of, the list. Obviously, you're all researching law firms, so do take their, list as well. But these are some of the key skills that you need, of which all of you mentioned. Now, I think in some guys, someone mentioned kind of motivation, but that is one of the #1 reasons when I used to screen applications and interview that students weren't successful on vacation scheme assessment days and also throughout the interview process. And that's those questions. Why do I want to be a lawyer? Why I want to be a commercial lawyer, and why I want to work at this firm. So that is why those questions are so important to have clear in your mind and to have well-researched answers to those. Commercial awareness, I'll come on to in a minute. I know some students it feels a slight dread, but I'll come on to a minute about what it actually means throughout the application process, because I don't think it's as complicated as some students feel that it is. But absolutely, I'd say commercial awareness and motivation were probably the two most common reasons when I used to screen applications. Someone mentioned resilience and adaptability. Absolutely, this has become, I would say, a kind of a recent skill. In the years that I worked in graduate recruitment, it wasn't something we particularly looked at in detail at the start, but certainly when I left Hogan Lovells in 2018, it was a key skill, particularly now that you see things like situational judgment tests. That is, often looking at resilience and adaptability, thinking on your feet, adapting to a situation that you couldn't possibly anticipate, which is very much what will happen as a trainee. All the others, I think, are kind of a fairly self-explanatory. You've all got them. The one I want to focus on in particular is attention to detail. This is the only skill that really can be properly tested on an application form or CV cover letter, where you're writing something down. So you're, showing that you have good attention to detail in your writing, in terms of good grammar, good spelling, good sentence structure, no jargon. You're not picking up the thesaurus and just looking through it and putting in some big words that sound really impressive, but actually don't sound like you at all, or don't sound like a however old you are student would write. So don't discount how important attention to detail is. Students were rejected. I rejected students on their poor grammar and spelling, because you can't be a lawyer without good attention to detail and the ability to write clearly and concisely. So yes, get people to read through our application form, get them to check for grammar and spelling. But the final aspect of attention to detail, which again, I think students sometimes don't think in as much detail about, is attention to detail is also making sure that you are answering the question. I'm going to come on to that a little bit later, but a great tip someone once told me recently is that when you finish your application form is to give it to someone, and particularly giving them, the longer answers to someone, and asking them, just giving them your answer, asking them to tell you what they think the question is that you're answering. So quite painful, I think, if they have no idea, or quite hard if it's quite a specific question, but it's just getting you to think, am I actually answering the question that's being asked? And not a question that was quite similar on another application form, the actual question that you're being asked. And that is good attention to detail. And you will be surprised, or possibly not surprised, how often that lets students down, that they just haven't answered what they're actually being asked. And I'll talk in a moment about how you can make sure you're doing that. But the reason to have this list of skills in advance, which a lot of you have already, is, again, if I ask some of you now, virtually or in person, okay, what example would you give, for resilience or adaptability? Or if you had to give 3 examples of teamwork and leadership, could you just give them like that? If not, then spend some time before you even start application forms, making a note for each of the skills that the law firms you're applying to are looking for, of how you would demonstrate that particular skill. So if you had to demonstrate resilience and adaptability, what 2 or 3 examples would you use? If you had to demonstrate, your communication skills, if you had to demonstrate your teamwork and leadership, or your teamwork and collaboration's often used more, means the same as teamwork, but how would you demonstrate those? What examples would you give? And have a document or something just where all of these examples are recorded, because when you're coming to do application forms, having it all on one document, all in one place, having already done all of that thinking, again, is going to help you in the application process, is going to make sure that you're using the most relevant examples because you've thought about them, and is also going to make sure that you're using a range of examples throughout the application form, because you can't just use the same example throughout. There has to be a range. So spending that time thinking in advance is really going to kind of stand you in good stead. So commercial awareness, as that was the first thing that popped in on the chat box, kind of what does it actually mean when a firm says they're looking for students to demonstrate commercial awareness? What does it mean? It means three things. It means understanding how a law firm operates. It means understanding how businesses operate. And it means having an understanding and interest in what's going on in the business world. So, in terms of understanding how a law firm operates, that means, do you know how a partnership works? Do you know how law firms make money? Could you explain to me how a law firm finds clients? Could you explain to me now how a law firm keeps clients, wins new business with clients? Do you understand if a law firm, if a client says they work with a number of different law firms, why they would have, a panel of law firms working for them rather than one specific firm? Do you know what trainees do on a daily basis? Do you know that if you met a trainee and they said, oh, I'm doing a seat in finance, what practice areas that might involve? If they're very specific and they say, I'm doing a seat in financial regulatory, team, what kind of work would they actually be doing? Could you think of examples of work that trainees might have to do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? If they're in a litigation seat, what kind of work might they be doing? And that is how you demonstrate that you understand how a law firm operates. Now, some of that information is really easy to pick up. There are lots and lots of different resources that will give you that kind of general understanding of how law firms operate. A lot of it is going to, webinars and things like this, and just asking trainees. If you're meeting trainees or lawyers and they say, oh, I'm a specialist in this, it's you, asking them the follow-up question, like, what does that mean? What do you actually do? We've all been through it. When I started at Hogan Lovells, I'd never worked in law before. I didn't study law. I'm not a lawyer. So I just asked lots and lots of questions. And lawyers love talking about themselves, so they will love answering any questions that you ask them, particularly if it's about their work. But that's how you build up your understanding. The second, about how businesses operate, is I can guarantee all of you will any of you who've had a part-time role will already have a really good understanding of how businesses operate. Because whoever you work for, whatever you did, it'll have either been a profit-making company in which you'll have, gained an understanding of, how that business makes money, or if it's non-profit making, kind of, how the money, any revenue they take in is used within the business. You will have, if it's a client-facing role, might have been, serving customers in a cafe, but again, you're serving a client, you're meeting a client's needs, you're, often thinking on the spot. You might have developed time management skills through that job. Again, a great general business skill. You will have had an understanding of, whoever you were working for, who their competitors were. So you will have already developed that understanding, of how businesses operate. And that's what law firms are looking for you. A law firm is a profit-making business at the end of the day. So just, do you have that quite general understanding of how businesses operate and general business skills? The last area, which I think is probably the one that most students get hung up on, is that understanding and interest of what's going on in the business world. And that's where it's, researching, having an interest in what's going on in the commercial world and the commercial business world, but taking it one step further of, how are law firms involved with this? And 99% of businesses will have a law firm involved, if not all. So it's you, through your research, through everything, being able to demonstrate the role of law firms within what's going on in the business news. I say that's it, that's all you need to demonstrate. But it's really not on a really complex level. You don't need to be reading the FT. I've never read the FT in my life, but I was able to assess people on their commercial awareness. So it's not this highly complex, that you need to have the same commercial awareness as lawyers. You just need to have a certain level, and more importantly, an interest in the commercial world. If you're there in front of the firm trying to convince them that you want to be a commercial lawyer, then you've got to back that up with how law firms operate, how businesses operate, and how the two work together, and why that interests you. So don't overlook it. It's an incredibly important thing to demonstrate, but don't get too hung up that it's this really sort of complex thing you need to know in detail. Okay, let's go on. It's a lot of me talking. I'll get you interacting again in a minute. So you've got that list, you kind of worked out those questions. You then move on to the application process, and there are essentially kind of still two different processes. So there are still firms who are looking for kind of CVs and cover letters, and there are still firms who are looking for application forms. So I can get a sense of how much time to show on each. Can you now just pop in the chat box if you are applying to firms who want application forms, if you're applying to firms who want CVs, or if you're applying to firms who want both? And then, or you can say it out loud, you can talk. And I'm just going to check which to focus on more, or that was both. Okay, both. So both. Okay, and I've just seen actually 2 questions that have come through. So that on kind of what firms look for. So firstly, experiences. So when we were talking about what law firms look for and what kind of experience, is experience from 2 years ago too old? No. I would make sure when you're talking and using different examples is they're not all from about 5 or 6 years ago. So 2 years ago, fine. A year ago, great. This summer, brilliant. But law firms are very understanding that this summer was quite possibly was the strangest summer any of us have ever had. So in terms of the amount on your CV from this summer is not going to be huge amounts. So yeah, 2 years ago, fine. I just wouldn't have all of your examples from kind of 8, 9 years ago, or, you know, if you're just, you know, at university from sort of, you know, don't have all of your examples of things that you did in the 6th form. I noticed someone else put an example that asked around kind of most firms want extroverts who talk a lot. I don't think they do. I'm very interested that you've got that in impression. They are looking for people who are confident in why they want to be a lawyer, and that people who are confident that it's the right career for them, and people who are confident that it's the right firm for them. And that goes back to those 3 questions I said at the beginning. I think often the extroverts are the people who talk the most on possibly assessment days and open days, and you will always get them. You'll get them in every single line of work. But really, really trust me that law firms are looking for both types, but they are looking for people who are just confident in knowing that they want to be a lawyer and, you know, can demonstrate that. And you can do that in a very kind of, you know, quiet, unassuming way, but it's making sure that you have that confidence within. And that confidence comes out on assessment days. And that confidence doesn't have to come out by being the loudest person there. It just has to come out through what you say and how you say it. I hope that answers the question. But it's not about, being the loudest. It's about what you say, convincing, you know, the recruiters. And that's often more powerful. And please don't think that the extroverts are always the people who get the offers. I say that from experience. So let's go on then, CVs and cover letters, and then we'll go on to application forms. So you should have a legal CV. It shouldn't be a CV that you use for any other jobs or roles. It should be one that's quite specific to law firms and the law firms that you're applying to. So these are the most common sections that you will have on a CV. So obviously personal information, your email address, your phone number, but check with the firms that you're applying to, because often, even if a firm is asking for a CV, you will also be submitting an online application form as well that might ask for your personal details on the form. So you might have to fill in a form and then attach your CV. So you might not even need the personal information section. The next section you have is education. This needs to be chronological order with the most recent first. So that needs to be, if you're all studying at university, where you're studying, what you're studying, and if you're in your 2nd year, it needs to have all of your completed 1st year module grades to date. So that has to be on your CV. You need to give all of your grades to date. If, which I think was the case at UCI, if you got like did you get a pass fail for your 1st year? Some of you or not? I can see, this is most annoying, the chat box is taking over my screen. So, did you get pass fail? If someone wants to unmute themselves, please do, as to kind of what you got in your 1st year grades. Annie, I'm going to look at you to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I know that some universities replace their assessments on a pass-fail basis, like UCL for sure did. So some students might need a little guidance on that.
Okay, so you have no grades whatsoever for your 1st year?
Yeah, all first year.
No, like no percentage grades. It was just pass or fail.
Yeah, it was just pass or fail. So I think that kind of caused students to be worried about possibly putting NA on the application form, and whether we'd need to explain it in the mitigating circumstances section.
Yeah, so if you don't, thanks, Annie. So education, so university, and then you need to have your A-levels and GCSEs and those grades as well. But in terms of the university, so if you're studying at UCL, or if you're studying at a university that doesn't have, weren't awarded grades for your first year, then if the, I would on your CV put pass or fail, and then just put in brackets a note saying, you know, no grades awarded due to COVID-19. On an application form, if it's only allowing you to put in a percentage, so I'm just going to mute and have a little cough. Too many webinars today, too many webinars. So if it's on an application form, and it will only allow you to put in a percentage, put 1 as the percentage, and then in the mitigating circumstances, explain why you don't have a grade for that. But I think with law firms are going to be seeing it more and more on application forms this year, so it certainly won't be overlooked. The other thing you can do is email the firm to explain the situation, that you don't have grades to input and how they would get around it, because again, they might have particular ways of doing it. But certainly on your CV, you just put pass or fail, and then, you know, a little, you know, 1-line explanation that you were not awarded percentage grades because of COVID-19. In the legal work experience section, this is where you will list anything that has been, ideally, that you've gone through some kind of application process or a formal process to gain that experience. So that can be virtual open days, which count as legal work experience. Obviously, it can be, you know, first year schemes or longer schemes. It can be work experience that you've taken place through your school. It can be work experience that has taken place through other kind of formal programs, you know, maybe designed to introduce students to law at university, that kind of thing. What I wouldn't put in the legal work experience, unless you have no other legal work experience, is the really, really big virtual internships and virtual vacation schemes that took place this summer. And by really big, I mean, I think kind of the Legal Cheek and the Bright Network ones. I would not put those in legal work experience if you have other legal work experience that you can put in there. And if you do have other legal work experience, then I would pop the bigger ones in the achievement section, assuming that you completed it and you have the certificate. If you have no other legal work experience, absolutely put those in your legal work experience section, but, you know, I wouldn't include them there if you have, you know, other open days or other experiences that you've had. If you have done a virtual vacation or a virtual internship, one of the free ones that anyone can do with the firm that you're applying to, absolutely put that in the legal work experience section. So if you're applying to a firm that is asking you to submit a CV and you have done a free, you know, virtual internship program specifically for that firm, then absolutely include that in the legal work experience section, because you want them to see that first. It's all about that motivation, wanting to apply. Other work experience is, as it says, any other legal work, any other non-legal work experience, and anything can go down. Please don't try and filter it thinking, oh no, that's not relevant. All non-legal work experience is relevant, because it's such a fantastic way that you can show that you have, you know, those skills that the firms are looking for. So teamwork, leadership, timekeeping, time management, communication, interpersonal. All, I can guarantee you, if I sat down now with all of your CVs, you would all be able to demonstrate most of those skills through your non-legal work experience. So it's a really, really important part of your CV and a really, really important part of application forms as well. So don't rush it, don't overlook it. And what you need to do in your other work experience section, and this is the same for application forms as well, is if it's not obvious from the title of the role, is just having, you know, first sentence should be describing what the role was and your main responsibilities. I would also allude to anywhere that you were given additional responsibilities, if you were promoted within the role, or, you know, suddenly in charge of a team, or, you know, given an extra position of responsibility within the time that you worked there. I wouldn't allude too much to the skills that you know, developed through that experience. That's something that graduate recruiters can do. We can work out the skills that you developed, but you might find other sessions that you go to might say something different. I don't feel you need to explain the skills that you developed from a work experience section. You might go to a session with a firm that says they do want to see that. So just, it's worth, if you can go to sessions with the firms that you're applying to, going to them. But I would focus more on what the role involved and any kind of positions of responsibility, or, you know, specific responsibilities that you had as part of that position. Achievements is, as it said, it could be those big virtual you know, internship programs that you did. It could be positions of responsibility that you have at university or outside of university in your community. It could be positions of responsibility you have with other organizations, you know, like in-state, if any of you are working, you know, that would certainly go down in achievements. Obviously awards and things like that, any positions of responsibility you had at your school as well would all go down in the achievements. Interests and activities is, as it said, all I say there is that you put down something that you genuinely do, you're genuinely interested in, because, you know, you might be asked questions about it, and the last thing you want is you're opposite someone who's an expert in it and you've maybe slightly exaggerated your interest in one particular passion because you thought it sounded good. Now, references, if you're applying to a firm, again, they will often ask you to submit references on a separate application form. Always have an academic reference ready. So if you don't already have that in place or know who you will ask and have checked with that person in advance that it's okay to ask them, then do that urgently today. If you're about to submit forms and you don't know who you would ask, or you haven't checked with the person that you think you're going to put down, if they will provide an academic reference, then, you know, ask that person straight away. Some universities seem to have a process now for requesting references, so just, you know, get yourself in that system so that is not the thing that slows you down. At Hogan Lovells, we ask for academic references all the time, so it is asked for. So don't think, you know, you don't need to put down any details there. So it is an important part of the process. I can see that some questions have come through on the chat. So great questions. Okay, how long does a CV need to be? 2 pages, please. No longer. My CV is 2 pages. I've been working for a long time. So if I can get it on 2 pages, so can you. But that's 2 pages of good size text, not 2 pages with size 6 font to squeeze everything on. Do you need to put all module grades on your CV when the application requires you to fill this in? Nope, don't repeat information. If you have to put that elsewhere, take it off your CV. Do we put secondary school awards? Yes, if they were, yeah, absolutely. If they were quite recent, so if you left secondary school a few years ago, yes, if you left. So I don't have my secondary school awards on my CV because that would look a little bit weird. But yes, if you left school quite recently. Okay, great question. If you have no legal work experience, just miss that section out and just have a work experience section. It is common, particularly applying for vacation schemes, for students to have no legal work experience. So don't think you are alone in that. If you do have no legal work experience and there is time for you to do these before you apply, I would certainly look at doing some of the virtual legal internships that are online. I think this year there are more resources than ever before to give students an insight into law firms. So if you haven't had any kind of, you know, structured legal work experience specifically through a firm that you've applied to, then I would absolutely be doing any free virtual internships that you can do. So I know Linklaters has one, I think Pins and Masons has one, I think there's a kind of a free version of a Hogan Lovells one. There were probably many more that I don't know of, but I would be doing those to start with. So again, it's all about that motivation that you've kind of gone above and beyond to make sure it's the right career path for you. So that's your CV. Cover letter, they are all quite unique to the firm. So always double check with the firm firms have different preferences on what they want you to include or any particular questions they might want you to ask. So always check on the websites of firms before you're applying. But essentially, in a nutshell, you're just answering those questions that we went through at the beginning. So why law? Why commercial law? Why that firm? Why are you applying to that firm in particular? And why you? And that's, all comes back to you demonstrating that you have the skills, you've done all the research, you know why you're going to make a great lawyer. The other thing that you would include on mitigating circumstances on a cover letter is mitigating circumstances. What should happen is your CV and your cover letter should work together. So your CV is all your academic and all your work experience, and your cover letter is covering all that motivation, which essentially an application form is covering. So the only thing that you haven't included on a CV and that doesn't fit into those questions for a cover letter is mitigating circumstances. And that's where you explain anything, maybe that you want to particularly draw attention to on your CV. So is it, that some grades that are that aren't consistent, or is there a gap on your CV, possibly between, going to university or leaving school and starting university? But that's, you might include a paragraph at the bottom for mitigating circumstances if there is nowhere else for you to include that. So if there isn't anywhere when you're submitting your CV and cover letter that you can, include that information. In terms of length of cover letters, I'm anticipating someone's going to ask me this question. Hard to answer. There are some firms that literally want a paragraph. There are some firms that just say, write as much as you feel you need to tell us. I'm not going to say it should be this length, it should be this length. What I'm going to say is make sure it is concise and you are giving concise, information. There's no waffle. There's nothing in there that is kind of unnecessary information. So you're very articulately answering, the why law, why commercial law, why that firm, and why you. So take out any kind of extra information that they don't need and just make sure that you're answering those 3 questions. And always err on the side of concise rather than lengthy. Is that, but you will never get to me to say how long a cover letter should be. That is the one thing from experience I'm never ever going to say. But check with the firm if they have a specific length that you're applying to, and if not, just make sure your letter is concise. Okay, on to application forms. Again, they will have very, very similar sections to what we've just gone through on the CV. The personal information, the education section, which we've covered, the work experience section, which we've covered. Same as how your CV. You will often find on application forms you're asked to input kind of other work experience. There might be a section now more and more on kind of open days or law firm specific events that you've gone to. There'll be a references section, and then there'll be kind of what we call the motivational, extracurricular and commercial awareness questions. Just one point on the work experience section of application forms. Please don't rush this section. Like I said before, there is so much that you can show around motivation with your legal work experience and anything you put down there, but also with your non-legal work experience section, so much you can show about you having developed those skills that law firms are looking for. So don't rush the work experience section, because it's a really, really important section of the application form that I feel students often overlook because they just think, oh, I just have to copy my CV, la 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 la, done. It's the kind of motivational questions that are so important. Every section of the application is important, and the work experience one is just as important as the kind of motivational questions. So let's go on to those motivational questions, which I'm sure you're all answering at the moment. Most forms in some guise will have a question around why are you applying to this firm, why are you applying to this opportunity, something like that. So I'm going to show you an answer that I put together to a question along those lines. Let's imagine the question was, why are you applying to X firm? And I want you to tell me what is good about the answer, but also what is not so good. Let's be positive, not so great about the answer. You can say it in person, you can do it on the chat. I'm just going to get you guys to have a look. So this is a response into, why X firm. apologies if you now, all you see is the chat on my screen. Okay. I love it. I clearly need to be a lot more subtle. It's too obvious. It's too obvious. But it's too obvious, and trust me, I have seen this answer again and again and again and again and again, year after year after year after year. And yes, it is too generic, because if you take out the name of the, if you could put in about 15 to 20 different firm names in the XX, and the answer would work perfectly. So it's firstly too generic for the firm. Secondly, it is too generic for the person who has written this, because it tells you nothing about why it's the right firm for them. Okay, so yes, they've lifted information off the brochure and the website, but it tells you nothing about, why you, though. So why you're interested in applying, because of all these things about the firm, but why is that important to you? Why is it important to be in a firm with prestigious clients or responsibility from the start? Can you give me examples of other, situations you've been in where you've really risen to having such a high level of responsibility? Why is it important, to be somewhere with world-class training or groundbreaking cross-border deals? What is it? Do you have lots of experience of working, overseas, or is it just something you focused on in your degree? Is it something you were exposed to on an open day? Is it something you found out a lot more about from someone you met at the firm that really kind of sparked your interest? So it's not just making it more specific to the firm, it's making it more specific to you. And that's, they're the two important points. With any motivation questions you write, keep saying to yourself, could this apply to another firm? If yes, it's too generic. And could this apply to anyone else but me? And if yes, then it's too generic. I know it's really, really hard, particularly as a lot of law firms sound very, very similar on brochures, on websites. I used to write the brochure on the website for Home Novels, and we used all the same phrases as every other firm. So it was always, open door policy, and cross-border deals was, as a favourite expression of some of the top commercial law firms. But that's where you relate it to you. Why is it important to you to be in a firm that offers it? What is it about you that means you're going to make the most of it? Or what is it about the research that you've done that makes it the right firm for you? And that's why it's so important right at the start of the process to spend a lot of time and to do a lot of research on why you want to be a lawyer, and the firms that you want to be a lawyer in, because that's all going to come out when you answer these kind of questions. But why you and just why that firm for you. The next type of questions that you'll often have are more sort of extracurricular, asking you to write about kind of different, particular skills maybe. And what I want you to do with these two questions is I want you to, let's focus on the first one, is I want you to read the question and tell me, again in the chat, or you can talk, tell me what the firm is looking for you to demonstrate. Oh, let me check the chat. Anyone coming in the chat? Come on, guys, don't let me down now. Oh gosh, I don't know what's going on with my mouse. There we go. Anyone coming through? What is that? Okay, great. Great. Okay, so yeah, how you'd cope in a situation like this, time management, team working. Yeah, okay, so this one is asking you for those resilience and adaptability questions, because you're right, as a trainee, you are often, probably on a daily basis, will suddenly be asked to drop everything. You might be doing an urgent piece of work for your supervisor when a partner comes in and says, I urgently need a trainee to do this, or you've got to do this, and it's you making that decision. Do I do it for the partner? Do I do it for my supervisor? What do I do? What do I do? And this is what situational judgment interviews and tests are testing you on as well. So they want you to show an example of a time where you suddenly had to drop everything, you had to be really resilient, you had to adapt what you were doing, but you were still successful. This isn't where you then say, and it was all a disaster, I made the wrong decision. You know, the outcome has to be, you know, I did this, I had to drop everything, I quickly adapted, and it was all fine and it was all great and everything was a success. That is the first part of the answer. The second one is absolutely about time management and you doing all of that, being able to adapt, as well as juggling lots of other different things going on. Because this is what, I mean, most people's jobs are this, but this is, you know, what particularly, you know, role of a trainee, they're looking for you to demonstrate that you already have done this, you can manage this. Also that you're able to kind of, you know, do quite an intense job as a trainee solicitor and also have lots of other things going on outside of your personal life, as you know, in your personal life as well, because they're looking for you to have that sort of work-life balance. With extracurricular questions, my 2 key bits of advice are firstly, do exactly what we did then. Read the question, step back and think, what have I got to demonstrate here? What are they asking me to show them that I have? And work that out first of all. Then you can go back to that document you have, hopefully, with all of the different examples you have of how you demonstrate these skills. And then double check each part of the question. Okay, so they're asking me about describing the time, but then they're also asking me how I manage this and my other commitments. So make sure you're actually answering the question. So for this top one, you would, you know, describe the time when you had to drop it and when you made an impact and when you were there and you were really resilient and you were really adaptable. And then the second part of the question, you literally answer that bit, you know, I was able to do this even though I had all of these other things going on because I have great time management and etc. etc. I'm making these up on the spot, please don't write down. What I'm saying, this is not articulate, this is not how you answer a question, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that you take a moment to look at the question, think to yourself, what are they asking me? And secondly, what are the different parts of the question I have to make sure I'm answering? If we look very quickly at the second one, you've got to describe your role, the outcome, and what you've learned. And I would literally do them in that order. My role, you know, in the challenge and the project, what the outcome was and how you had an impact, a positive impact on that outcome, and what you learned in that process. And I literally work through the answer in the way that they've asked it. The same goes for if a question says describe or give 2 examples, you give 2, you know, describe 4 ways, you give 4 ways. And that comes back to what I said right at the start, that attention to detail is also making sure that you answer the question that's being asked. And that's the way to do that, is to not rush in, is to actually say to yourself, why are they asking me this question? What do they want me to demonstrate that I have, or, you know, what skill do they want me to demonstrate that I, you know, that I already have? Okay, 2 o'clock. I'm just going to kind of draw to a close, then I'll have a look in the chat box for the questions. But so I think I've already covered most of these, but these are just the sort of the final hints and tips to take away from today. So attention to detail, I feel I've stressed enough how important that is, but please don't discount, you know, it's good grammar, it's good spelling, but it's also answering the questions on the application form. University modules we've put down there. I would say particularly from this summer, any problems that you have with different grades you're awarded, or you're not quite sure, you know, where they put, or they're not quite in the same format as previous years, just contact the firm and ask them how you can put that down. Write clearly and concisely. It's really, really important. It's a key skill you need as a lawyer, so you've got to be able to demonstrate on an application form that you can do that as well. And then use different examples for the motivational and extracurricular questions, which again, having that document where you're researching your, you know, all those skills in advance and thinking about how you demonstrate that. But that's, you know, if, for example, you had these 2 questions on an application form, you would need to put a different example for each question and not use the same one for that. So that's what I mean by that. Final tips, be genuine about why you want to apply to the firm. Again, that's why you, so not generic. What is it about the firm that has attracted you? Mitigating circumstances we've talked about. Word count, that is a good one that I didn't mention. So often with questions like this, you will be given a number of characters or words, or that you have to write. Use what the firm has given you. They are giving you a word count or a counter count for a reason, because that's how much information they want to receive from you. So do not kind of only write half of what is being asked of you in the word count. Use the word count to get a really good sense, a really good idea of the amount of information the law firm is asking from you. Answer the question we've just gone over, and your CV should only be 2 pages. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to unshare my screen, and I will open up the chat box and see the flurry of questions that I've missed. Okay, so if we have redone that. Okay, should we have a question here? I missed my. Should we add subheadings for each section of the cover letter to make it look clear and structured? No. Simple answer to that. Okay, so someone's asked, will we be disadvantaged if we have a 2-2? That is really going to depend on the law firm that you're applying to, how much weight they put particularly on academic grades. It might apply if there are any mitigating circumstances. It's going to really apply, depend on the firm that you're applying to, because each have slightly different approaches to university grades. So if you are worried about that, I would genuinely call up the graduate recruitment team and be prepared if it's not the answer that you want to hear. But I would call them and just take that step, because you don't want to be filling in vacation scheme application forms to a firm that will take one look at your kind of first year grades and say no. So really, take the time, call them and ask them before you're applying. Okay, so someone here, great question. You mentioned putting virtual internships down as work experience. Did you put down all of these for each firm, even though some of them won't be for that specific firm? Good question. How many have you done? Is my first response to that. Wow. Okay. So, without seeing your CV and knowing all of your other work experience, it's a judgment call for you. If you have done one with the firm you're applying to, absolutely put it down. If you don't have much other work experience, I would maybe include them all if you have no other work experience. If you have some other work experience, you might want to condense them into one entry. So if, for example, you've been on a lot of open days, including maybe one with the firm that you're applying to, I would always put the firm you're applying to open day as one separate section on an application form. And then you can group other open days together in one other section. Does this make any sense? And I can see you nodding. So you would put, so if you're applying to HSF, for example, and you'd gone to one of their virtual open days, you would put HSF, virtual open day, but maybe you'd also been to Clifford Chance or Ashurst or Travers Smith or, 8 other, this rarely happens, I don't want you all to be panicking that this is common, but you would then maybe group those into, other firm open days, and then in the description box you would put, I've also attended open days with, list the firms, these gave me great insight into life as a trainee or something like that. But I would always put any experience for the firm you're applying to separately, because you want them to see that and you want them to think, oh, they're interested, that's great. Because you're already then half answering the kind of why us, why our firm question. I hope that answers. Okay. Gosh, this is a good question, right? How would you suggest preventing burnout when applying to firms because the process is very long and tedious? I would suggest not applying to a huge number of firms, and I appreciate it is very, very easy for me to say this. as someone who used to be on the other side, I think it used to probably be even worse when I'd say it when I was at Hogan Lovells. I didn't apply to anyone else. Really shortlist that firm, really shortlist that. So the firms that you're applying to are firms that you would really like to do a vacation scheme with. Some students say, oh, I'm going to do a few that I'm not that keen on, or maybe I'm going to start with a few. I would say possibly make sure that the first application form you do is not your number one dream firm, because like everything, you will get better. Likewise, the last application form you do, you will probably have had enough by then. So don't make sure that's not the firm that you're kind of your top firm. Burnout would be everything I've suggested. So having your answers to those really clear questions, having a document where you've already thought about all of the skills. So when you sit down to write the forms, you're not literally starting from scratch again and again. So you're not going, okay, so an example of teamwork. You've got it all, you've done all of the thinking. Secondly, I would do the easier parts of application forms before you don't do a whole application form in one go. So, register for all the firms you think you're going to apply to, go and do your personal details, save, leave. Another day, maybe go and do your work experience for all of the forms, because they'll be quite similar. Leave, save, download the extracurricular motivational questions, so you can be thinking about those without having to input them. But I would do it in stages, like that would be my advice. But I'm not someone who's ever had to complete 15 application forms at once. So this is just kind of my tips on how to pace yourself. I'm sure there are others here on this, who've probably been through it maybe and can give their hints and tips. But that's a great question. So that's my kind of insight. I'm going to take one more question, then we're going to round up because I'm conscious of time. How to stay motivated when you receive a number of rejections? Gosh, Caroline, it's a good question. Okay, 2 things to remember. 1, vacation schemes are incredibly competitive, some say even more competitive than training contracts, because you will have more people applying for vacation schemes who are maybe still considering maybe commercial law or another type of law, or being a solicitor and a barrister. So theoretically, there are slightly more people applying for vacation schemes than training contracts, because when you get to training contracts, you know that's what you want to do. There are also very limited places on vacation schemes. So firstly, know that if you are rejected, I don't know if this helps, lots and lots of people are rejected for vacation schemes. I'm not sure if that helps. But no, you are certainly not alone. And secondly, that a vacation scheme is not the be all and end all. We used to offer a lot of training contracts to people who, hadn't done vacation schemes either with us or any other firm, but had done everything else they possibly could to research that it was the right career for them. So they'd, been to online events, or they'd been to events then at their university. Do you remember? Way back when events were in person. So they'd been to events, they'd used every possible way they could to research law as a career to make sure it's the right one for them. They were able to bring in how relevant their non-legal work experience was as well, which again, I was saying, is a really important part of the form. And they were very, very convincing and were able to really articulate why law. So it is not, a vacation scheme is not the be all and end all of getting a training contract. Yes, there are some firms where you have to have a VAC scheme to then, get a training contract, but they are fewer. There are fewer firms like that than there are that will let you apply for a vacation scheme and will also let you apply for a training contract as well. My last question is, do you have to have a legal work experience if you're applying for a training contract? Again, depends on the firm. Most of the top firms, yes, they are going to look for you to have some kind of exposure to law firms, ideally law firms similar to themselves, if not themselves. But that can be open days. That can, nowadays be virtual vacation schemes. It doesn't have to be a, virtual internships. It doesn't have to be a vacation scheme. You can demonstrate legal work experience in all those different ways, open events, insight afternoons, all these count as legal work experience. I think that's it for me. I'm going to just put my email in here into the chat box. So if anyone has any specific questions, they can follow up with me or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, but I'm sure InState have got lots more kind of legal events coming up as well to answer any questions you have. I'm going to hand over to Annie.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Alison, for that very insightful presentation. I'm sure everyone found that very useful. I personally did. And yeah, thank you to everyone who participated and made the most out of this opportunity with your questions and your responses in the chat. Yeah, I'd just like to plug our future in-state events that are coming up. We have a few for consulting and finance this week. And we've got other next week, and we've got other law events coming up as well. Please sign up to Vantage as well. We've got Wednesday webinars coming up, and do tell your friends. Do tell your friends about InState. If you found this useful, do post it on LinkedIn. And if you've got any follow-up questions, then don't hesitate to get in touch. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you again to everyone who participated, and keep an eye out. Thank you, Alison, again. And yeah, thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.